because of studying neuroscience relatively recently, I knew how much we know about the brain and dreams, which is not that much. So I think it freed me to basically go into the realm of fantasy when it comes to like the OEG machine and building dreams like code.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm here with Temi, who's the author of More Perfect. I've only got my art copy. I don't have the finished edition with me. So, Temi, start off. Can you let us know what's the brief synopsis of More Perfect? Give us the elevator pitch.
Yeah, so it's set in a future where most people are opting to connect their brains to the internet via a device called the Pulse, which also allows them to share dreams with each other. So the government in London have called a referendum on whether or not this technology should be compulsory, and sort of two tribes emerge. There are the revelators, who are like really vehemently anti-technology, who have kind of been committing acts of terrorism across the UK in an effort to convince people out of voting for this bill. And there are the people who work for the panopticon, who believe that this technology will like sort of allow us to untether from our bodies and collapse our identity and live forever and cure depression. And I have two characters who are on either side of this, one who works for the panopticon and one who is sort of like becoming radicalized into being a revelator, and they fall in love with each other. And it sort of follows the tale of Orpheus and Eurydice. Yeah.
I loved the book. I can say that I loved it. I literally was reading. I was like, I think I read the whole thing in about 3 days.
That's amazing.
I can't put this down. But with the book, is there anything that you'd recommend? Like, why should people read it? Who is it for?
I guess I think like a lot of people were kind of saying that it's like it feels sort of eerily familiar. While I was writing it, I was thinking a lot about my own dysfunctional relationship with like the internet and social media, like how much I miss it when I'm not using it, but then how pretty much everyone, almost no one you talk to, especially who's a millennial, will say, I'm very happy with my relationship with the internet.
Yeah.
It doesn't take over areas of my life that I didn't want to sacrifice. So I think, yeah, if you sort of have this like ambivalent relationship, it's probably for you. And if you like Greek myths, maybe it's for you too. Yeah.
We've just run a read along, as you know, with about the book, and we split the group into two. So we had one side who were total adoption and one side who were revelators. And so all of the questions were sort of coming. They created their own characters to be kind of on each side. And we had those conversations of actually how great it was to see the Orpheus and Eurydice myth in the future, in a dystopian novel, in a way that is really different, which was fantastic.
Yeah, I thought it was a really cool. I heard about that you were sort of dividing people in two, which I found quite interesting. The thing I find interesting is I feel like I try quite hard to sell the Pulse and all the things that it can do. But anytime I pitch this novel to people, they're always like, I think I'd be a revelator, which I find interesting that that's like everyone's intuition, but also interesting that almost everyone who tells me that is on Instagram. So, yeah. And they're not like bombing the streets and against technology now.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
It's funny you say that, because when I split the group in two, because I didn't tell anyone what group they were going to be in, I just split them. And all of the revelators were like, yes, I'm so glad you're in this group. Yeah. And everyone else like, oh, this was in the other group. But then by the time I got to the end, they'd got so invested and were like, actually, total adoption.
That's interesting. Yeah, I feel like I alone. I mean, okay, total adoption, I guess, is quite extreme. But like, there are so many times it's like when I'm on holiday that I say to my husband, like, if I had a pulse, I wouldn't have to be looking at my guidebook to figure out what that like architecture is. I could just see it. I could look at everything instead of looking down.
Yeah.
But
I for probably the first 2/3 I was all about the Pulse. Then I got towards the end and I was like, actually, is this technology a little bit scary? But
Yeah.
maybe that's me just being a millennial who's
I think that, like, I'm sure in practice, I mean, if we just think about like how glitchy it was trying to get on an Instagram live, there would probably be so many like technical flaws in this technology that you wouldn't really want to give your brain over to it. I don't explore that in the book because I think I'm sort of trying to come at it more like from a philosophical angle, but there'd probably be a lot more downsides, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Technology always sounds great on paper, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In practice, as we found out.
Yeah.
So with that, what was the inspiration behind the book? Was there anything that drove you to write this story?
Yeah, so it was in my like first year of marriage. I was lying, well, I was watching my husband fall asleep and thinking about how when he fell asleep he was like drifting away from me, and where he went I couldn't go. So I was sort of like, it's like, oh, I'm gonna miss you when you go to sleep. And his eyes opened and he was like, ew. Like the thought. It's like, what's wrong with you that you'd want to like follow me where I go? And I think it was like the two ideas like that I was like, it's so romantic, we can know everything about each other. And then to him it was horrifying, made me think of like the two different viewpoints about this idea. And I guess also because I got married, well, when I got married I was thinking a lot about how you sort of have a joint identity as a married couple, and like the project of marriage is like involves sort of merging some of like the boundaries of like your ambitions and like your identity.
Yeah.
And so I was looking at that, like that's a really old institution, and then thinking about like a sort of modern take on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's so interesting. Because like you say, there's all that philosophy kind of theme as well. And there are parts that felt quite, say, true to recent history. Obviously, we've had a recent referendum that didn't go where everybody wanted. But yeah, did things like that tie into the book when you were
Yeah,
writing?
I mean, I would say like I'm quite a political person. My parents have like a picture of me holding a placard at like age 5, um which about like, yeah, so I don't know, yeah. And I had a lot of experience of like personally campaigning and canvassing, and I really enjoyed it. Like I would say I'm quite a lot like Zeba, maybe not about technology but just about like I'll get an idea and then try and like evangelize to everyone. So I was quite sure I wanted to put a referendum in a story.
Yeah.
But then it's quite hard to dramatize. I wrote a lot more about the results coming in because clearly it meant a lot to me that needed to be edited out. So yeah.
Do you have a favorite character, or would you say or character you relate to the most, or would that be Zeba?
I think probably Zeba. Yeah, I think I'm probably the most like her, not about like technology, but just like about like if I have an idea, I really like to try and convince other people. Yeah.
So I'm seeing we've got some questions coming in from the group as well. And speaking of the referendum, which way did Marmee vote?
Oh, yeah, I don't say. Yeah, this is the thing. I sort of felt like if I said it would be too much like the author saying, and this is the right answer.
Yeah.
So I didn't do that. And then also, I don't know, votes are private. You're not supposed to tell people how you voted. So
Yeah, no, I like
yeah.
that. It was, yeah, we were having a discussion in the group about which way everybody would vote. And obviously they were like, oh, well, we're total adoption, so we have to vote for it. But I don't know if I want to now after seeing that bit. And some of the revelators actually switched sides as well.
That's so
was really
interesting.
interesting to see, yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of like your writing style and how you write, do you have any habits in terms of writing?
Oh yeah, I mean this changes all the time. Like I had a day job for quite a long while I was writing More Perfect, which is part-time. So on the days I was working, because I'm a morning person, I'd try and get up early and write. Sometimes I'd like do some editing on my lunch break, or when the idea first came to me, I was doing my master's and I was working in a in the gift shop at a zoo, and and we had like these paper bags that we would give people like when they bought things, and I would work on the till and like surreptitiously like write all my ideas down on the paper bag and then like take them all home in the evening. And then towards the end of editing, I got to work full time, but then I had babies. Then it was like I'd work whenever I could convince a sibling or a parent to take my baby. So I don't know. I really don't have like a schedule. It's sort of, it depends on life. I prefer to write in the morning. And I like to write by hand, especially with my first drafts. I kind of try and do by hand as much as possible. Even though this is quite a techie novel, like as far away as I can get from the internet, the more productive I'll be. So, yeah.
Are you one of those people who just falls into like a Wikipedia wormhole?
Yeah, definitely. And I also think that like I'm always just warring with myself when it comes to writing. Like some part of me desperately wants to be distracted. If a friend of mine ever says like, "Oh, let's write together," I'll be the one who looks up and goes, "Ooh, I was thinking about this. Let's talk about this. Let's order lunch. Let's order second lunch." Yeah. So yeah.
So with it, do you ever have like music playing when you're writing, or are you someone who has to be in silence?
Yeah, it kind of has to be in silence. I really, as like few distractions as I can get, the better. Then I don't have an excuse for like my like lack of productivity. So yeah.
Wow. And have you always been a writer? Is that something that from a child you knew you wanted to do?
Yeah, my parents say that I learned to talk really early, and that apparently I would tell them stories. And I have like a really distinct memory of being age 9 and my dad saying, "You know, you tell a lot of stories. Why don't you write some of them down and we'll get them published?" But he said it like it was so easy.
Everyone does that.
I think it's like that confidence that like I like made me like hit the ground running when it came to writing. I was like, okay, I'm 9, I'm gonna write a novel. So I like spent basically all of my teens writing and rewriting a novel. I remember when my 13th birthday, my siblings all went to a fun fair with my dad, and I sat at home with like his old laptop just typing away at my novel and thinking, this is a great birthday. So, yeah. So yeah,
I love that as the birthday present. You don't get to go out.
Yeah. But so yeah, I have been a writer like as long as I can remember, really. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I think it's so fun to see people's different like writing styles, and like everyone has so many different like styles and habits and things like that. It's great. And is there anything that you're working on at the moment?
Yeah, like a couple of things. I have like an idea for book 3. I have been writing for TV. We have a show where I'm working on the spin-off of Castlevania that comes on Netflix soon. So that's very exciting. And I was writing on this sci-fi show called Silver Point, which is on BBC iPlayer. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you prefer writing for TV or films or novels?
It's funny, they're such opposite things. Like I'm a very sociable person, and I think part of what I do struggle with writing a novel is it's just many hours spent alone.
Yeah.
So I love being in a writer's room because then I could sort of like bounce off ideas, and you can also like play to each other's strengths. And when I'm on my own and I come up with and I come into like some kind of plot problem, I'll like go for long walks and tell my husband, "Oh, I'm a terrible writer," until I get an idea. Whereas like if you're in a writer's room, some like the showrunner can be like, "Here's a problem," and then we can just like pitch solutions together. I love that efficiency. I always kept thinking like if I had something like this on my own, it would be amazing. But then at the same time, you're working together, and sometimes you have to make decisions that are like they're not for story reasons, they're for technical reasons. It'll be, oh well, we can't set this in a school because of COVID, or oh no, actually we can't have a dragon, there's too much CGI. Whereas like in a novel, it's like unlimited budget, and as an author, you're the director. So I think I enjoy both. I think in my ideal life, I'd get to keep doing both things.
So they're very different. Would you, speaking of like with TV, if More Perfect was going to become a show or a movie, do you have anyone in mind? Who would you cast?
I find this so hard. It's interesting because like I had loads of ideas with my first book, though everyone I thought of is now too old to be the characters. But I don't have any ideas with Terror 2. Oh, sorry, with More Perfect. I did I really enjoyed the audiobook, and the voices were pretty much the way I imagined them. So I liked that about it. Yeah, but I don't have any actors in mind, no.
Well, let's just have it as open casting then.
Yeah.
So I was just having a look. We've got a couple of questions from the groups. So Katie has asked, what made you want to incorporate the Greek retelling into the story, or which ideas came first? Was it the tech or the Greek retelling?
Probably the tech, since there was that kernel of the idea about dreams. And then I've always been kind of interested in Orpheus, the story of Orpheus, because I'm quite a morbid person, and that Neil Gaiman did like a BBC show exploring all the different myths of Orpheus, and I knew the part about how he tried to rescue his wife. I like that it's a tale about sort of the arrogance of someone who thinks that they can overcome death. But the thing I didn't know about was that later in his life, his head is pulled off by, there are different tales. One of the stories is Maenads, who are like the followers of Dionysus, who's like the god of like drink and revelry. Apparently they come across him and pull him limb from limb and tear his head off. And when it floats down a river and sings all the way. And there are lots of other stories about like the head of Orpheus and how his head alone would like sing and tell prophecies. It was so dark but amazing, to me anyway. I was like a child that was very obsessed with beheadings. So I really wanted to write a story that had that part of it, that his head is pulled off. So yeah, that is in the story. But it's sort of like plot-wise how to make that happen was a big challenge to me.
Yeah. And with that, I've got a couple of questions from Fo as well. Did you know it was always going to end the way it did?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the way that the myth is. So we definitely wanted to follow the myth. Otherwise, there's nothing it would have in common except for, I guess, the names. So that was definitely important to me. And when I had the idea, I had the thing that seemed obvious to me was that it would be more Emmy saving Orpheus. Wait, I can talk about spoilers on here, can I? Or not? Or I should
not go too spoilery.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, I definitely thought that it would be the other way around. Yeah.
And Faye's also asked, what was the most interesting thing you researched for this book?
Yeah, I was quite interested in brain-machine interfaces. I was also like looking at different ways to like delay death, because I guess there was quite a lot about death. And this ended up not really making it into the book, even though this is a long rabbit hole and many chapters. I was interested in the kinds of people who decide to like, freeze their bodies in case of the chance that they can be awakened. So I did a lot of reading about that. One book I really enjoyed was To Be a Machine by Mark O'Connell, where he does lots of investigative journalism into transhumanism. So that was definitely like a springboard for a lot of my ideas. Yeah,
that's really interesting. I really liked the pulse pairing sort of aspect on how then, like I say, it's that next level where actually your spirit is going to continue, and even if your body is no longer, your thoughts and your brain are still there, which was, I found that interesting and slightly terrifying.
Yeah, I found it interesting to like explore why it's frightening. I feel like there are quite a lot of like religions that are about overcoming your ego, and I feel like it feels like a death because we're so attached to our like ego. And like if all of our memories may remain, even if it's part of this larger body, the terror that we feel is because we're like, I'm a singular being, and I wouldn't be me if I wasn't that. Like that's the same as death. But then, you know, there are lots of like strands of like different philosophies and religions that say that the goal is to be part of the larger being. So yeah, I found that.
I loved it. It's fantastic. So it really gets you thinking in that. And obviously we've spoken about a few different elements of the book, but so obviously there was a lot of research that went into it. Are you someone who does all of the research and then writes, or do you get an idea, write a bit, do a bit of research?
So this one actually had surprisingly little research compared to my first book, because my undergraduate degree was in neuroscience.
Okay.
So I think I already felt comfortable about trying to explain the way that this machine would work. And I also think because of studying neuroscience as like relatively recently, I knew how much we know about the brain and dreams, which is not that much. So I think it freed me to basically go into the realm of fantasy when it comes to like the OEG machine and building dreams like code. There's like nothing even close to that. So yeah. So there wasn't like a lot of research to do. Yeah.
I love that aspect, the idea of having a dreamscape, which is something that you've seen in sci-fi for a while, but like you say, it's nothing that exists or is even close to in real life, but it's such an awesome idea. And then I was going to ask a few things about like what else you're reading and watching at the moment. So are you someone who can read for pleasure while you're writing, or do you need to be 100% invested in the novel?
In general, well, it's hard to say, because with my first book and up until I was writing More Perfect, I really could, but maybe just because it took me a really long time. It took me 4 years working on this book, and towards the last 2 years I got into a real reading blog. I think it was because I'd like queued up lots of books to read that would like inspire me with my novel, but then I felt like it completely took the like joy out of reading for me, because like every time I sat down in like leisure time I'd think, oh, I should read this book. And yeah, so yeah, I one of the joys of the fact that this book has come out is I've noticed my reading block has lifted.
That's good.
And I'm trying with my other works, one, to write faster so that I don't get like so stressed out about it, but also maybe not pressure myself so much to read related to whatever it is that I'm writing, so that it doesn't feel so much like work.
It's interesting. I've spoken to some authors who cannot read in the same genre. If they're writing a thriller, they can only read romances and have to be something completely different, which I always think must be so interesting to like completely switch your brain to a different gear there.
Yeah, it was interesting. The thing I found that I loved to read is like very gossipy family dramas, like the kinds that would like go inside all the different people's minds, and like everyone had some secrets and they'd come out, which is like really quite different. But like now it's kind of inspiring my idea for my third book. So yeah, so maybe
tell us all about your third book.
I mean, I can say it, but then who knows if you'll see it, and you might have to wait half a decade to see it. But yeah, I'm quite interested in a sort of like family of preppers. So like people who like prep for the end of the world. I'd kind of been interested in them before the pandemic, and then after the pandemic got really like obsessed with preppers. I think because I'm such a disorganized person, I like distantly feel the worry but never do anything in my life to make my life easier to avoid it. So I think I'm like interested in like this sort of family that they've kind of been forced into doing it. So yeah, I think
that's really interesting. I felt like there was almost that same element at the beginning with Orpheus and his father. You know, they could have been preppers, but where they were so isolated away from everything.
Yeah, I think some of my interest in that, like, and I think also maybe just because I'm really interested in people who like make the choice to live in a really low tech way. So maybe it's more of my like anxieties about technology. I always think I need so much infrastructure to just survive, to live a comfortable life. I wasn't completely, one of my friends told me something about That like rice grows in fields when I was 19, and I was like, no, that's like the spaghetti tree. That's a lie. That's how little I know as like an urban child. So yeah, I'm quite interested in exploring people who are the opposite way.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. And while we're sort of like on the subject, is there anything that you're reading at the moment?
Yeah, this is like not related at all. But I was really enjoying this book called I Have Some Questions for You,
Yeah.
by Rebecca Mackay or McKay. It's sort of like true crimey. A girl dies in her boarding school and she goes back, and someone else wants to make a podcast about it, and it's 20 years ago. And it has this feel of a true crime, but it's also sort of questioning the genre. So I'm really enjoying that. Yeah.
That sounds really good. And is there anything that you're watching on Netflix or on TV at the moment?
Oh, so many things. Yellow Jackets, season 2. I was very stressed out because it moved on to Paramount Plus and I didn't need a new subscription to another thing. But I love Yellow Jackets. And also Black Mirror came out on Netflix just recently. So I've been enjoying that. Yeah, those are like the main things.
I'm yet to start the next season of Black Mirror. I feel like I've got to be in the right brain space for it.
It's true that it's quite dark. Yeah.
Yeah. But Black Mirror, again, it's one of those that I can either, if I'm not in quite the right space, I'll get it really into my head and be like, everything's going to go mad and die.
They have one episode that's sort of critiquing true crime as well, which I found quite interesting.
Ooh, interesting. So I was then just going to, just last couple of kind of questions I've got here, and I'm going to just check to see if there's anything else come through from the groups. But with the sort of sci-fi dystopian genre that you write in, is there anyone that you really look up to in the genre? Anyone you could say would be like the champions of the genre?
Oh, well, really look up to, or yeah, champions. I mean, I guess like a classic champion is Octavia Butler, who I like discovered in my 20s. But now I'm like reading a lot about her life and how dedicated she was to the genre, which I found really amazing. And then look up to right now, I really like Helen Oyeyemi's work. It's not sci-fi, it's sort of magical realism fantasy, but it's so lyrical and beautiful, and it like explores identity, and it's kind of gothic. All of her, loads of the images and lots of the stories that she writes really stick with me. And I grew up reading her because her first book, The Icarus Girl, she wrote when she was in sixth form. And she's like a British Nigerian author. And my mum gave it to me when I was about 12 or 13. And I think it was reading that made me think, I could do it. I could do it. So, yeah.
I love that. Yeah. Seeing those authors who, especially it's so successful, so young.
Yeah.
Like, you're such an inspiration.
Yeah.
For me, like, why have I never done anything with my life? But that's a whole different subject here.
Everything we do matters.
And then I was going to ask, do you have any recommendations for, once you've read More Perfect, what would you recommend people read next?
Well, I was very inspired by The Circle when I read it. And I also really enjoyed this book. I didn't hear talked about that much when I was, but Don DeLillo's 0K. It's about this sort of like cult that have like gathered in the desert, who believe that they're all going to freeze their bodies and be like brought back to life. The kind of people who sort of believe in like that they'll the kind of people who believe that they can like defeat death in that way, that like in the future the technology will be able to revive them. And this one tech billionaire has decided to do it, and his son goes to visit him in this like spiritual group. And I think what I loved about it is, one, Don DeLillo's writing is just like, it's like delicious to read. All the sentences are beautiful, but there is the kind of marrying of like technology and spirituality, the fact that like they had faith but it was in this technology, the sort of like religious element really inspired me with my book. Yeah, so also Jennifer Egan's The Candy House came out like when I was doing copy edits for my book, and I was like, I'm glad I didn't come across this book when I had the idea for my book, because I would have abandoned it. Yeah. It's a very interesting sort of anthology type of a novel about different characters who can save their memories on the sort of social media and then like access parts of it and share them.
Ooh.
Yeah. And it's written by Jennifer Egan, who's amazing. Yeah.
Was there anything else that you wanted to speak about or say to the viewers?
Keep a lookout for my show on Netflix when it comes out. I'm very excited and proud of it. Yeah. Yeah.
Brilliant. In that case, thank you so much for joining me, technology issues aside. And yeah, we've absolutely loved the book, and again, I know everyone reading it has just loved it so much. And we'll see you around on Instagram and on the rest of social.